Folks, welcome to an on-site edition of the Jake Feinberg Show. The true nature reveals itself all the time. It is the process by which you are able to look in the mirror and not look back, except to promote the values of Elvin Jones, Colin Walcott, and my guest. To swing was never a question for my guest. It just mattered that it feels good. Music of another present era is finding your true nature in the music of Oregon, a band that continues today and reaches into the breach of classical music with jazz changes using world instruments, or maybe Ralph Towner on the Ringmodulator. My guest was born and raised in Portland and at an early age connected with Native American Jim Pepper, whose free spirit is in the same vein as Leon Russell, Carmen MCrae, and rasa and Roland Kirk. The records I own in which my guest is features allows me to expand consciousness and be more at peace to discover my true nature. Oregon is a band that features polyrhythms and odd time signatures. They were an acoustic counterpoint to the electronic development of Mahavishnu in the early 70s. The ability to express yourself in a nonverbal fashion enhances your perception of man and the music. At times, the music takes over, the player knowing that it comes from another space or place and trusting in that sincerity. I sit here in Winter Count, Arizona with my guest in a true desert oasis, a camp of the earth and the indigenous. To remain connected to the cosmos, then you must remain grounded to the earth, knowing that if you don't practice, the wood upright bass will humble you. Glen Moore, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Thanks, Jake. Pleasure to be here. Thanks for coming and finding me.
I'm curious about your listening style, the active listening, within all of the groups you've been with, or any people that you've collaborated with. In my mind, how important to you is listening?
Well, a story maybe. I made a record in 1977-78 with Zbigniew Seifert, Jan Hammer, and David Darling, called Introducing Glen Moore.
What was the label on that?
Excuse me?
What was the label?
Warner's.
Warner.
Yeah.
Okay.
At a time that Oregon was also with Warner's. And when I got a copy of this record, I went to Jeremy Steig's house, good friend. And at his house were Miroslav Vitus and Jan Hammer and someone else, maybe David Liebman. So Steig's like, what do you got there? And I said, well, this is my record. So he put it on. And I had spent a long time preparing for this record, writing these, over years, writing the pieces that went on there, playing with Zbigniew Seifert, and getting to experience this amazing violinist. Played quite a bit with David Darling and done a lot of playing with Jan Hammer where he was playing drums rather than piano. He's a great drummer.
Absolutely great drummer.
And so I put that music together, rehearsed with each of those guys individually but never together. Then went in the studio and did one day of short rehearsals to figure out the forms that the songs would take. And for them to hear one another.
Together at that point.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then the next day we recorded things. Zbigniew can only be there for part of the day because he was making the Passion record with an orchestra and a huge entourage of the most amazing people. Eddie Gomez playing bass and Ron Carter in the orchestra section. And so I'm sitting there to listen. Then I listened so hard to get the over and over and over again. Paul Bley gave me a machine so that I could work with a quarter-inch tape and do the editing before I went into the studio. And I had to do quite a bit of editing because we played things once and it was over, and we were just meeting, and so there were all kinds of great collisions and things happened, and some of which just determined what went on and were kept, and other things take something out and put something else in. But when I sat down, so I'd listen to, and I knew the music so well. The mixing took a week to mix it, and then I recorded solo pieces for a couple of days and put those in. So when I sat down to listen with these guys, I knew this music forward and backward. But when the music went on, listening with these guys who are all giants on their instrument in all kinds of circumstances, the music sounded enormous and way beyond anything that I'd ever heard before. Because being in that room with these musicians, I would hear it with their ears. And when I moved to New York, the way one made a living playing the bass was not playing with Miles. It was playing for $5 a night with Nick Brignola, or it was playing with folk singers, because they were the ones who... So I played with Tim Hardin. I played with Tim because Tim hired jazz players. Mm-hmm. Tim's band was...
Right, that's right.
I was playing with Jeremy Steig at the time. He and I played a lot of duos because he had grown up with Eddie Gomez. They went to music and art high school together. But Eddie was on the road with Bill in those days. So Jeremy needed a bass, and fortunate for me, I met Warren Bernhardt, who was a piano player that played with Tim and with Jeremy. And I ended up becoming good friends with Jeremy, and we did probably 100 nights of duo concerts in some little town somewhere. They're traveling all around, playing in New York. We played a good deal with Jan Hammer playing drums as a trio. The way that we met Tim, so I met Tim, came back to town and did a Carnegie Hall concert. Eddie did the concert, and then Eddie went on the road, and I was asked to join the band. And Tim's band, it was hard enough playing folk music with people where there were heavy drugs involved. I had children. I would go to rehearsals, and the rehearsals wouldn't happen when they were supposed to happen, and days later something would happen. And so I would work a couple of concerts with Tim, and then I would escape back. I was working in New York with Zoot Sims at the Half Note. And mostly the guys in those bands were people that had gigs in New York, playing the Tonight Show, and then they'd come down and play. This was their
Studio
recreation.
Mm-hmm.
They'd get to go and get drunk and play all the tunes and see all the cats. But for me, that was like super important, but I really couldn't afford to live on that $135 a week. So Tim would pay me more than twice that, to go to Chicago with him for a weekend. So every once in a while I would go. Finally, I invited Ralph to come on one of these things when he came to New York, because he couldn't find any work either. And we ended up then, every once in a while, if Tim had something, he would come and say, well, look, there's this thing. So we played opposite Joni Mitchell in Central Park and got to ride with her in the limo to the gig. That was just thrilling, totally thrilling. But finally, Tim came to me one day, and I saw him in the street, and he said, look, I'm going to do this thing in some pasture in Woodstock, and I'm putting together a fancy band. Can you come? And I said, well, I'll come if Ralph can come. Yeah. So we went to a rehearsal in Woodstock, and there was, in Tim's house, here was the band, two of the guys in the band, the cellist Richard Bach and a drummer named Maruga, had just been playing with the Winter Consort. They were both just quitting with the Winter Consort, and they regaled us with stories. This is 1969.
Richard Bach, no relation to Dick Bach of Pacific Jazz Records, right?
No.
I know that. I've seen his name on records.
Yeah, he's a classical cellist.
That's right. Okay, that's
and so these guys talked about this band that actually had concerts on a stage with a sound system. We're jazzers in the corner, standing on the rug like everybody else, and nobody's paying any attention. The music that we were listening to was Miles's band with Herbie Hancock, Tony Williams, and Wayne Shorter. Right. And that band connected with 20th century classical music. It was as far out on those recordings of Wayne's things, not stuff they did live, but stuff in the studio. It was like listening to what Bartok was doing, listening to what Stravinsky was doing, because they were listening to that shit.
That's right.
So that was the focus.
They were listening to
Now, meanwhile, we're listening to that, learning every tune that came out, getting together with our friends, with Mark Copeland, with John Abercrombie, with the guys that we hung with, who were the other young players in town, and we're playing Nefertiti and the songs that are coming out of Miles's band, but everybody's got to work, so we're going off and playing whole notes behind something, or playing. I had to learn to play like a cowboy, and I had to play electric bass. I hated it. I had no instincts for electric bass. So these strings are all over the place because they're the top two are gut that's covered with. So if a breeze blows by, they change, they go sharp, they go flat, depending on whether it's a warm or a cold breeze.
Let's not gloss over stock for a minute here. How do you, looking back on it, I interviewed David Bromberg, and he was in a teepee. It was pouring rain. A lot of the major psychedelic rock bands got washed out. But looking back for you personally, describe the experience, because Tim Hardin doesn't get a lot of play when it comes to people talking about Woodstock.
No, you can see there's video of him doing a solo and something else where we're playing, but you can't even hear us.
Right.
All you hear is him. And so you can see him from that time. You can hear that Tim Hardin could sit here in this chair and sing a song to you about what you're feeling right now. He had a sort of a psychic desire to please and perform, and the smartness to make up something Hank Williamsy like that hit the nail on the head. Yeah. So he had a great skill, and he wanted to be surrounded by jazz players. He didn't know how to explain it or how to write anything down. He was completely self-taught, and so
I've seen like on some of those records. I don't think I've seen you on the records, but I've seen guys like Don Friedman or Mike Maneri, vibes players too.
Mike was in that band.
Mike was in it, and Bernhardt was playing.
Warren Bernhardt, Donald McDonald.
I'm obsessed with Donald McDonald. Obsessed.
He was a fantastic drummer. So we ended up going into the studio, and Tim was sued by his production company they had been paying for him to take bands on the road, and he'd just been keeping the fees and not. So they were like, and his wife sued him for divorce.
At the same time?
At the same time, in the same week we were supposed to be recording. So he just flipped out.
Yeah.
He was like not even
he
there,
lost his
really.
mind, yeah.
And so what did we do? So we sat around. We're like, well, what can we do? We rehearsed some things, but Tim had forgotten in the wake of this even what we were going to do. So he was pretty much out of it. He didn't want to do anything we suggested. And so what happened was the drummer, Maruga, did not show up. So there was underground New York. The call went out, there's a drummer needed. I got a call from a guy who said, you must come to this jam session today because there's this guy who I'm getting together with and he plays the sitar. You have to hear him. And I didn't really want to go. I had my son. I was a single parent in New York, and I kept putting up, oh, no, I can't do it because I got to take care of my son. He said, called back and said, well, look, if my girlfriend takes care of okay. And so he made it so I couldn't help but do it. I go there, and there's Colin Walcott playing the sitar and the tabla. And I ended up walking back across town with him, went to his house, and this is his house here, pictured on the back. This was an apartment that Jason Robarts had fixed. There were real Navajo rugs on the floor and Chinese. Colin had just this exquisite taste. He had all these instruments. There was a full marimba, giant.
The old ones, yeah. Oh.
And he had studied classical percussionist. He could play Ralph's classical guitar pieces on the marimba. So Ayrto came to be the drummer. And, well, no, that didn't suit the style of music. And Colin showed up with his tabla and his sitar. And Tim wasn't even there. We ended up going outside in the hallway, and Ralph and Colin played a guitar, classical guitar, and sitar duet. And that was like, oh my God.
Yeah, right.
Paul Winter comes by the studio because Richard Bach, the cellist, is there, and Maruga is supposed to be. And they'd been talking about Ralph's classical guitar playing. They needed a new guitarist. The bassist, whoever, was not going to be there. And so Paul was looking for a band for gigs that started in January. And so between the end of September and that January, we rehearsed a few times with Paul Winter up in Connecticut at his place. And then on the 15th of January, we began a 50-concert tour, mostly of the South. We drove 25,000 miles on that tour. And by the end of that tour, the four of us were getting together before the concert and after the concert and playing, because we found that the four of us, not including David Darling on cello and Paul Winter, just the four of us, there was enough space so we could hear one another and enough kind of simpatico that we could begin to find things. And so Ralph, in the course of that very first tour, wrote Icarus, and he wrote all the music that's on Road, that album. You have that album? On A&M, Road.
That is a hard one to find.
Yeah, it is, but you can find it.
I will find it. No. I'm curious. How did McCandless come into the picture?
He was already there.
So when did you got to New York and met him almost immediately?
No, we met him. He knew
he was already
Richard
in
Bach.
Okay, right.
And he was already in the Winter Consort, and so toward the end of the week, Paul came by to see Richard, hearing that this unusual thing is going on. And then Paul Winter heard Paul McCandless's report of, yes, these guys are players, and this could work.
Yes.
So Paul sort of invited us in, and Paul had been, I think, for a couple of years, he'd been playing with Paul Winter. McCandless said, yeah. So he was already there. And the three of us came in.
There wasn't this incessant need to brand the way we have now. I mean, you have to be branded. So what were people, if Winter just, if you guys were tuning up on stage and then you maybe even improvised and people heard it, people were coming up to you and saying that they were jazzed, but were they using any terminology, labeling the music at all? What were they calling the music you were playing at that time?
Well, it was artfully presented. We had our own sound system that we traveled with. There were 8 Klipsch Scalas on the edge of the stage. We were using Neumann's recording studio quality, not even live. Nobody was doing live sound.
I never knew how to pronounce that name, Neumann.
Yeah. And so we're doing this thing. We had one free piece a night where it was called Lose Your Mind and Come to Your Senses. We'd turn the lights off. Now, the first night he did this, he said to each of us, okay, you guys haven't done this before, so here's the deal. We'll play play whatever, play a different instrument, anything you like. And we're going to turn the lights off, and then we'll just do something. We'll make something up, but we'll stick sort of with a D Dorian scale. It'll be built around that, and you go off, but we'll come back to that. So that was the first night. So we do this, and I have a flute, and I've never played the flute in public in my life, but I have a Neumann microphone, and the lights are off. So I play something, and I didn't play it. There were no D Dorian scales. We just started putting sounds. Ralph's playing the French horn and the trumpet and these instruments, and we're doing these things. And by the time that tour was over, when we started, David Darling wasn't there yet. Fred Sherry, a really great classical cellist from New York, was in the band, but he quit about 2 weeks into it because he could go to the Rachmaninoff competition in Russia and play the cello, and he was going to go home and practice, and he said, I'm out of here. So we ended up, Paul Winter was always finding amazing people. He heard about David Darling, who was in Indiana or someplace in school then. So we had a week, almost a week off, a couple of weeks into the tour, and we went there with David Darling and started rehearsing and made a new, I think we could just play the pieces Paul already had. And we rehearsed them with David. And then slowly Paul bought a 12-string guitar and handed it to Ralph and said, here's something Jose Feliciano wanted made for him that was a wide neck, like a classical guitar. And he never came back for it. And so Paul Winter said, I'll take it. And just handed it to Ralph. And Ralph went to his room and wrote Icarus. And now when we got ready to record, Phil Ramone came and listened to us, and he listened to the whole show, and he said, well, I like this song Icarus. Yeah. He said, write 9 more songs like that, and then call me. And we said, wait, we're not going to be around that long. We're going to record now. Yeah. We have lots of
who was he the A&R guy for at that time, Phil Ramone?
Phil Ramone, he was at A&R. He was R of A&R. And
at A&M?
No, not for A&M. This is Phil Ramone had his own studio in New York. He didn't have anything to do with A&M.
And he didn't have anything to do with any record company.
He did with everything. He did Paul Simon's records. He did everybody's records of any kind.
So he could go to different, but I mean, he wasn't affiliated with Vanguard, or he could just say to you, "I'll get this out to different people." I can.
No. Paul Winter had a deal to record a live album. He could choose whoever recorded the album.
Got it.
And you look for the best people. For people, in this case, he was looking for someone who would see the live show and hear the music, and give us an opinion. So he gave us his opinion, which was that there should be 9 more songs written. We knew that we had a really solid, incredible show at that point. By the time we listened to that,
tight, yeah.
With all the music that we had. So we started in January, and the record came out, I think, the next fall. We recorded it in the summer. Yeah, we flew. I forget exactly how this happened, but within 6 or 7 months, we had the recording.
So he goes to make 9 more tracks like Icarus, and you're like, whoa, we're not going to be around.
No, we already had all these songs. If you get that album and you listen to it, we had this. Ralph had written by that time all these.
That is a hard one to come by. I've never seen Road, and I see Winter Light. I see.
Well, these things actually came out and were out for a while, but Road is Road's the one to get.
Yeah, I'm gonna. Well,
you can get it from Paul Winter. Go to his website and find it. And
only on vinyl though.
Maybe.
Maybe.
You can put it on whatever you like.
Anyway, so you had this. So continue, please.
So we got the material together, but all the time that this was going on, we were still getting together before and after, and finally, before Icarus was recorded, Colin said one day, "What if we just did this shit ourselves?" And it was a quartet. It wasn't, because 6 people it's like an orchestra. It's like so many people. What are you going to do? You got to sit there while somebody else does something.
Well, and the truth is, there was. Paul, as a genius, also had a big ego. So then you could get. Then it just comes down to the quartet.
Yeah. Well, so we ended up started to play little concerts around New York. We're all in New York, or Paul's in New Haven, but he comes down all the time, and so we just started doing things here. And actually, by the summer, oh my God, yes, this is how it happened. By the summer, we were recording, for we'd recorded Road. We're in L.A., and we sit down in the living room of this guy, a friend of Colin's. Colin knows all these music business people in L.A. because he'd worked with Ravi there. He'd been Ravi's road manager. He had gone to UCLA to study musicology, but the scene was so alive, he found Ravi and became Ravi's disciple. Ravi picked him to be his disciple because he was at a party where Ravi was, and he needed to get to the airport in like less than an hour from someplace in North L.A. And Colin was a driver. And somebody said, "Colin's a good driver, let him take you." So Colin went like some way, and Ravi watched this, and he got to the airport in time, and eventually Colin got a call that said, "Ravi would like to see you." So Ravi wanted somebody who could drive, and incidentally wanted to learn to play. So the exchange could be, well, okay, I'll show you something. He
mentored him on the sitar and the tablas. He got
Alla Rocca.
Alla Rocca on the tablas.
The tabla.
Yeah.
Alla Rocca called him his genius son.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but the first real swing jazz record you were on was here, the Nick Drignola record. So talk about...
This is it?
This is it.
This is it.
This is it. And I'm like, this is it. So how did that come about? I mean, Dick grew up in San Francisco, but he went to New York. He was Billie Holiday's last drummer. Mm-hmm. So how did... And I know he loved... But how did that all come together?
In '67, I got to New York. I started going to any place where their bass player could ever sit in. And the Half Note down on Spring Street was such a place. And it was Zoot Sims for a month, and then there was somebody else, and it was Zoot Sims again. And one night, Gomez was supposed to be working. They'd hired him. He was in town, and then Bill got a gig. So somehow Eddie went ahead and gave him my number to Jake Hanna, drummer with Woody Herman's band. And Jake was the drummer. It was his gig, but Zoot's playing.
Right.
So they were used to Eddie doing this. They'd want it if they could get him. They were in heaven, but they couldn't always get him. So they'd take him, and then at the last minute, I'd call in. And so he ended up giving my name. So I went in and played. And at the end of the night, Jake Hanna said to me, or at the end of the first set, he said, "Man, your time's good. You can solo every tune." So, okay, I had Jake on my side, and at the end of the night, he said, "Be back tomorrow night." This is going on for at least a month.
Zoot? It was a trio?
No.
It was Hannah's gig.
This is Jake, whose time is so good. It was easy to play with Jake. It's like talk about,
It was like Dick's
wonderful.
Time,
yeah. And so Zoot is playing, and what's his name? Marv, piano player for 20 years with Johnny Carson. I can see his face, but I can't.
Anyway, yeah, I don't know.
Anyway, It was a quartet, but there was always another horn player sitting in, and it was like... So, across the street, in a dingy little place, Burke is playing with Nick Mignola and Ted Curson. And I don't know who was playing the bass, but whoever it was got an actual job, because this thing paid $5 a night. And so they got a hold of me in one of the breaks and not getting to work after I'd been there. They'd heard me play. It was like, hey, the guy across the street, he's young, but he's. So they got me. So I went in. They had a piano there, but there were 17 notes on the piano that worked.
The dog du jour. Yeah, Joe Sample used to say, he's like, what's my dog du jour of the night? The pianos were wretched.
So here we are, and I went in and played, and it's Dick and Nick and Ted. And these guys got some shit together. They play tempos. And it's like, just as anything you can do, you do. And
it was straight ahead.
Yeah, just straight ahead, just like what?
Boykins. Boykins was the bass player. Ronnie Boykins.
Could have been.
Yeah.
I think that they get anybody who had the night off, but I ended up getting the gig and doing there, and then there was another club up on Broadway that was owned by the same schmucks. Terrible. Right.
So
then, this is by 1972. Oregon has started. There's talk of a record deal, but that thing happens when all of a sudden you know that you've got something that could be far out, but you don't have any work, and people are not calling you because they think, "Are you doing that other thing?"
Yeah,
maybe?
right.
Yeah, no, he's busy. So then Ted got this chance to do a record, and so Reese Markowitz, who was a piano player and a flute player, who knew Scotty well, was from upstate New York as well. Ted was from
Nick. Nick Mignola.
Nick was from Troy.
Right.
So he knew all the cats upstate. He'd known the Pharaoh. And so he started calling me. There was a young piano player whose name I do not remember, who used to drive up from New York to play with Nick on the weekends. There was a period when I had no work. I mean, there was nothing happening in New York. I couldn't scare up anything. And so this Nick called and said, you want the guy's coming up, you can cram I had a small bass then, smaller than this one. You can cram your bass into this Volkswagen Bug with a piano player, and he'll drive you up. And you can stay with me or stay with him, and we do these gigs. And he said, I got this great drummer, man, you'll love him. He's a Hawaiian kid, just a wild guy. And so I'd go up there and play. So I had that winter, I must have done like 8 or 10 times. I must have gone up. You go up for 2 nights, play your ass off, play these.
Where, in the Polytechnic school? Where were you playing? Some dive?
Just in some club that loved it, and the place is full.
Really? That's great.
And this drummer was just wild. I started bowing because I couldn't hear myself for this. When I go to play a solo, I couldn't hear myself. There's still no amplification, you know.
Yeah.
You're just going...
Was he was playing like...
He's just like, you know,
You're just like...
what every horn player wants. So, no, I started doing my solos with the bow, and I had a big blanket there was a feather comforter that went around my bass. I put it on the floor, and I'd bow, and then I'd throw the bow down and get back to the... So we did a lot of wild stuff. I mean, the tunes would last like a half an hour or 40 minutes. And then every once in a while we do something with Burke as well. But Nick decided to make a record, and of course they wanted Burke, not the Wild Kid.
Yeah, right.
Wild Kid was good for live, and he got him for nothing, but he didn't want to record with him because that was like
too frenetic.
Business.
Yeah, right.
Just go with somebody who can just play the whatever. And Burke, one of the funniest guys there ever was. I mean, there was a comic that would come into this little club where he first played, and this guy, Burke would just needle him. Burke was twice as fast as this comic and twice as funny. So Burke would just sit there and talk back to him. What do you mean? Is that all you got? So Burke was hilarious, and he was doing all kinds of stuff. Curson was a really interesting guy, together guy, probably one of the first black men who had an American Express card in 1967. Fall of '69, just as the like right after Woodstock, then my son went back to Oregon, and I became like by this time I'm getting ready to, my wife is on the West Coast. I go out and get her because I'm starting with the Winter Consort, and bring her back with the kids and drive across the country. I want to have a family and I want to live with my family, but I'm making no money. So we moved to Woodstock. Well, first we moved to Cherry Valley, New York, and then we moved to Woodstock. And then once I got the Winter Consort gig, that first tour was 10 weeks long. When I came back, my wife was in love with a neighbor guy who was a jewelry maker because he was like there all the time. And from there on, the family thing was just totally screwed and pulled apart. But thank God she took beautiful care of the kids. And so they made it through. And it wasn't until 74 or early 75 when I could say to her, okay, I've got a loft in New York that the boys can come and spend the year with me. She's like, I don't want them there. They can come in the summer for a little bit. So...
Was it too... did she not like the scene, or was it like there was...
Oh, just the city itself. I mean, just being a parent in
Well, it
New
was
York.
a very dangerous... My parents... I grew up in Long Island, you know. I mean, my folks talk about going into the city in the early 70s, and, I mean, it was not a safe place.
No. If they're in the neighborhood where my loft was, women wore tennis shoes at night when they walked in the streets, and they walked down the middle of the streets.
Not on the sidewalks.
Not on the sidewalk. And this is like the industrial, this is Soho.
Right.
There was nothing fancy in there at all.
Right.
I rented a place.
But did she engage? Did she appreciate?
She didn't really know what the scene was like. She herself had lived for a while after we lived in Woodstock together. Why she ended up there herself. She stayed. We went to Cherry Valley. She fell in love with a farmer up there and went off with him. I mean, this was the time when people were like sort of, what the heck?
Yeah, it was open.
Love the one you're with. So, I mean, she did fine, and she has a good life in Portland. Our first sons are amazing. They're both colonels in the Army. They're astonishing guys. One's in Afghanistan right now. A battalion commander, amazing guy. And he's the one who came and stayed in a motel while Woodstock was going on. And he was around for a lot of this shit.
He did. I would love to talk to him about what he looks back. If that really, it must have helped him in some way. I just say to myself, my wife is also. She sees the characters, the artists I tend to commingle with, and some of my habits, or so to speak, what kind of breaks my heart a little bit is just about, because I do love my family, I love my wife. I want her to appreciate the people that I'm with, and that was the thing, that you were around all these really special people, and your wife and your first wife wasn't really. She didn't really want to even get into it. So that
she was around for the early part of it. Once Oregon hit, she loved it.
She did.
She loved the music. I gave her when we separated. I gave her all my all my vinyl. She got everything, and she loves the music. She comes to the music now. We're Facebook friends, but at the time she was just frightened of being a parent, and I had no guarantee of money. It's like, whoa, I didn't really have that many gigs in New York once Oregon started. I worked with Benny Wallace. He and I did a lot of duo gigs. Mostly there were gigs in New York that paid $5 in a meal. And if you're going to be off for a month, okay, I'll do that for a month. 6 nights a week I'll play with Benny. Benny and I played in some little bar. Jocko would come and sit in on vibes or play my bass and mutter about how much he liked it. Hell, got to get me one of these.
Jocko.
And so you take a gig that lets you keep your chops up.
Yeah, right.
But there's no money coming from it. And by that time, Oregon was paying my rent because I had the loft where all the instruments were stored, and we rehearsed. So, okay, if the rent is paid, but it was still like...
So it was a different space than the Robards space. The loft that you had was different from that space.
Yeah. No, that was small. That was a living space. This was a 85-foot long, what had been a sewing machine. There'd been 100 sewing machines in there with Latin-speaking and Chinese-speaking women sitting, making God knows what they're doing in China now.
What an incredible! I cannot believe your sons are both are prestigious.
They saw all the unsureness of my life, because they kept coming to see me in the summers. They loved it, of course. It was a big adventure. But how
was it? How much fun was it when they were like kids, like not yet adults, but they were coming and getting a chance to hang with their dad?
They go to the World Trade Center, places that aren't there anymore.
Would you take them to gigs too, though, a lot?
No, they couldn't come to bars for the most part. They could come to some of the concerts. I took my eldest to a concert in Virginia, to 4 concerts. He was just blown away.
What did he say that effect? Do you remember what he said to you after that? I mean, it's just so fascinating.
He just jumped up and shouted. He's sitting in the front row. He was just, "That's my dad!"
Right.
And
it's such a good...
But it wasn't as much as I wanted, and there was no money, or I don't know where we're staying. I don't know. There were too many questions, and so my wife was right to.
But it's so funny. It's so great for you to be able to convey this, because the music doesn't convey any angst, but yet that was what you were surrounded with, because you were trying to stabilize your life and your family.
Well, it was just regular stuff as far as I could tell. I mean, anybody that had kids had kids.
That's right. Friesen, were you able to talk to guys?
Friesen wouldn't leave Portland or the West Coast because he saw that it was really hard to keep your family together and to live in some place, and your goal was to get a job working for Stan Getz or some drug-addled character a million miles away, and you might get back and you might not, and the money might be there and it might not, and it was a big question. I mean, I've been fortunate enough to have lived through that time and still be friends with my ex, and for my sons to be doing as well as they are, because when they were 11 and 13, I left New York and took them. At that point, my wife said, they don't listen to me anymore. Yeah. They're yours.
And where were you at that? Where were you living at that point? You in Oregon?
I was living in my loft in New York.
So you took them back. So you took them to the city?
No, I left New York.
And where'd you go?
To Oregon. I went to them. They'd been moved around so much, I decided to go to them. And
what year was that?
79.
Okay.
But then, eventually, Samantha and I met, and then we have a son. And when I met him, she heard all these stories of the kids not getting to come and going away and everything. So as soon as our youngest was 4, our only son, I was going to Europe for 4 things. She said, "You take him." I said, "Oh." She said, "No, just do it. You can figure it out. There's people taking care of you. You can get a babysitter."
I like that. A lot of trust.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, she knew that our life was not that easy. We were living on the coast in Oregon, with wood stoves and in a swamp. And there were records and the music that sounded like I did something, but I was like teaching in Portland, driving 100 miles to teach. But I felt like I owed it to my sons to go to some place where they could be riding their bikes.
You clearly it was all these major life situations that you had during your early career. It seems like all the right decisions in hindsight were made because your sons are extremely and then the fact that you were able to take them or get a hold of them at a time when they were probably just beginning to get rebellious, and you were able to sort of be like, I'm your dad, and let's go out and we can do stuff that only dads and sons can do.
Because Samantha was there.
Tell me about when you found out about Colin passing away, and talk about Colin's legacy. For all the people out there that may not know the name, talk about his legacy and the importance to Oregon, and also just the kind of person he was. Because he's been one of the spirits on I've played a lot of Colin Walcott on my radio show. So,
do you have his those records with Cadona?
No, I have one with. It's interesting. I have one with Dave Holland and John Abercrombie.
That was the early one on ECM. Get Cadona. It's a 3-record set. Cadona. Cadona. What the hell is this? Oh, that's from my father-in-law's funeral.
I'll write it down.
Okay.
So that's a heavy question, but I wanted you to talk about.
Okay.
I couldn't have asked anybody better.
Cadona.
I'll write it down. Cadona?
Yeah, it's Colin, Don, and Nana. That was the first 2 letters of their names. And
we didn't even talk about the Paul Blythe synth show.
Oh, we didn't. Listen, there's tons of stuff we didn't talk about.
Yeah, Cadona.
There's Paul Bley. There's Larry Karish. We didn't talk about Mojave. That was one of the best recordings I ever did. Mojave. With Larry Karish and Glenn Velez.
But you talked about.
I didn't talk about the Colin thing.
No. Because you said that when Ravi needed it, he had 45 minutes to get to the airport, and
Colin,
and you said Colin's a pretty good driver, and I think if I'm correct, he died in an auto accident.
Yes.
So, talk about how the impact
he wasn't driving. Joe Herting was driving, our Austrian driver, our mountain man guy.
Now, were you on tour at that time?
The band was on tour. Alexander, Samantha's and my son, was born, was due a week before the tour ended. And he arrived. Turns out they were wrong in estimating it. They finally figured out. But the guy sent me home before the tour was over. There were 4 more concerts. And I flew home.
You were not going to have a bass player?
No, we love to do this thing where if somebody's not there, then everybody has a little more. They have to play the part of the person who's there. So we'd always, hey, sure, Glenn, go, come on.
Glenn.
We got
having
you.
A baby.
Yeah, you're having a baby and your wife's worried, so you need to go home. So I did that, and I stayed. My wife was very pregnant, and we stayed in Portland for a couple of days, and then we went home to Oregon, to our home. And when I got there, on the answering machine was Ralph's voice telling me that Colin was dead and that Joe would die soon. Joe was young. They were both sitting up Colin didn't have a seatbelt on. They ran into a dump truck. And then in the fog in eastern Germany, on that road between Berlin and Dusseldorf, or the northern road, and then a gasoline truck ran into them there in the road. And so they were just scrunched. There was a horse trailer behind the bus that had all the instruments in it and things, or everybody would have died. But both Paul and Ralph were sleeping with their feet forward, so they ended up with really bad back problems, but neither.
Unbelievable. I did not realize the entire band, except you, was in there.
The place where I slept was totally wiped out. I would have been in the back, and the trailer with all Colin's instruments and everything but Ralph's guitar and Paul's oboe, those were in the main body. My bass would have been in there. And the part where I slept up to the bathroom was just totally accordioned. And
when you heard that, I mean, did it have it must have had a profound effect on everybody.
Yeah, it was a profound effect on everyone. We were pretty much ready to stop playing. I mean, Colin had been the one that said, we could, I told you earlier, we could do this shit, without Paul Winter. What about that? And everywhere we went in the world, Colin went to New England schools, was a Mayflower. His family came over on the Mayflower. They had Walcott Mills in Connecticut. The family property had the experimental forests of, now I think this is so, and maybe you better not use it, but I'll tell you that Yale and Harvard both had experimental forests on the Walcott property. I mean, these people, there was a governor, there was a Senator Walcott during the First World War. Colin, in fact, when he died, was reading this great-great-grandfather's book that he wrote about what it was like to go behind enemy lines during World War I and have dinner with the generals, German senators and generals at night. All the forces.
That's pretty hip.
So Colin went to the Putney School. He went to Yale. He went to UCLA. He went to all these schools. Everywhere we went, there was someone that Colin knew who went to school with him. He knew. He was just connected everywhere. Everywhere we went.
I mean, almost seemingly probably without trying that hard, too,
oh, yeah,
right?
no.
Just effortless.
And because he was born into a family that had a huge mansion thing, he hated privilege. He was like, he would walk through the streets, he'd take his tabla and put him in an army duffel bag and wad it up, put it over his shoulder and his sitar. That was it.
That's great.
And if he could have, his goal really in life was to be just a folk singer. He wrote that song. It's on one of our albums. It's on Always, Never, and Forever. It's called Lovin' You's Like Eating a Big Fat Orange. Couple of pits, but such a lot of groovy juice. So he'd do these, just silly things, simple things. And in spite of himself, he was a great thinker. He had the perfect percussion instrument for the case. Whenever there was a problem, he had a solution that went right up the middle of the road. It was like, why didn't we think of that?
Right.
He could solve any problem. I could make him laugh so hard, he would drop to the floor and roll around. And that made a lot of things happen because this guy really wanted to laugh. He was really super, just a superhuman.